Hello, everybody. We're back on Bhagavatam study, listening to Vidura and Maitreya have their interview. Uh, Mait- Vidura is interviewing Maitreya, and the questions are about at this at this point in the conversation. The questions are about where the universe comes from and what it is. So we got up to the point where Maitreya answers that the universe is just consciousness experiencing itself. That's what reality is, consciousness experiencing itself. So the seer seeing the scene, and the seer awakens the scene and invigorates it with energy, and then the scene produces from itself things to be seen. And within the scene are also other seers. And when those guys interact with the other parts of the scene, the inert parts of the scene, then it will cause different things to happen and become tangible and experienceable. So the first thing that will happen is the seers within the scene will wake up, become individually active. That's the ahankar. They wake up. It's mahatattva. They become individually active. It's ahankara, and then they activate the different qualities of inert prakriti, which is sattva, rajas, tamas, and the way that they the particular quality that they interact with generates a particular result, so that you get three. Rajas, tamas, sattva produces three levels or layers of reality. The bottom layer from tamas is the solid experienceable stuff. And the middle layer from rajas are the sense don't know if, the senses sight, vision, etc. That sight, vision, etc. You know what I mean? That can experience the solid objects, and then the top layer is the power to utilize those senses to experience the objects. Now, that's our catch up. Now we're at ketchup, mustard. Now we are now. Vidura wants to know how do things evolve within those three columns. So Maitreya is going to explain it briefly. He says the first object to evolve from tamas is space. Space becomes tangible as waves, because let's define what a wave is. It's not a wave on an ocean, but a wave is a measure of a distance between two things. You have a node, and then the area in between is the wave. So the distance between the two nodes determines the size of the wave. And so the concept of wave is the basic way of measuring space. So space is tangible by its dimensionality, but the dimensionality produces waves. It produces space in between nodes, in between points. And because of that, the basic sense perception there, the basic way that we perceive the dimensional waves of things is by sound. The closer together the two nodes are, the higher the pitch. The further apart the two nodes are, the lower the pitch. So Maitreya says the first thing to evolve from tamaguna is the least solid thing. Tamaguna is going to produce solid eventually, solid experienceable things, but the first thing to evolve is the least solid, and then gradually it becomes more and more solid. The first thing is just space itself, which is just a container in which everything else can exist. But you can also experience space directly, because the dimensions of the space, the size of it, the shape of it, etc., will affect the quality of sound. The waves are revealed as sound to our hearing. So you get along the three columns, what Maitreya is explaining is the evolution of the elements of the universe occurs simultaneously down the three columns. The three columns are Tamaguna, Rajaguna, Sattvaguna. So when Tamaguna produces an object to be experienced, then Rajaguna is going to produce the tool to experience it, and Sattvaguna is going to produce the power to use that tool. Then Tamaguna is going to produce another object, Rajaguna will produce another tool, Sattvaguna another power. So the first thing to evolve is space, which has dimension to it. So then Rajas is going to evolve a way to perceive dimension, which is sound. And then Sattva is going to produce power to utilize the tools to perceive sound, which is the mental facility for hearing. Abhishek is confused between Swabhava and Ahankar. I have to ask this question to somebody and think about it before I can clarify that to you. After a long time, the movement of these waves thickens space into air. An element whose motion is revealed as the sense of touch by our skin. Right? So the first thing to evolve out of tamas is space. Since space has the ability to contain waves, it has the ability to contain something. It's got dimension to it. So what is inside it is just space, but the space of various sizes is various wave. So as these waves exist, they fluctuate, they change, they move as the space moves. That causes motion. The motion in space is the definition of air. So as the waves in space accumulate, it evolves into air. Then air is going to produce a sense. It's going to cause the Rajas column to evolve a sense to perceive it. What's it going to perceive? It's going to perceive, the sense has to perceive movement, which means change. So it's going to perceive different types of change and like pressure. It's basically pressure change. And they also say it's temperature change. But I think the fundamental thing that is being experienced by the second sense is pressure change as things move from one part to another, from one place to another. That's basically usually the skin. And then the sattva column produces the power to process the data involved. You see what it is? The sattva column is the processor of the data to make sense of it. The rajas column is the I/O bus, the input-output bus of the data itself. And the tamas thing is the object that produces the data that's being experienced. After a long time, the movement of the waves in space thickens space into air, an element whose motion is revealed as the sense of touch by our skin. And the movement, so sense, any sense is just a detection of change. No, maybe. Maybe. Now, air is going to produce the next element. There's 5 elements, right? You heard of that. Now, I have a question for you, astrology fans. If there's 5 elements, why are there only 4 elements in the zodiac? Earth, water, fire, air. You got earth signs, you got fire signs, you got water signs, you got air signs. Well, where's space? You ever think about that? I'll give you an answer. The quality of space is that it's not concentrated or lax in any place. It's not actually, space isn't actually a thing. It's a container in which things are. And so the quality of space is that it's uniform. Whereas the other elements are not uniform. They're discretely tangible within space. So fire will coagulate in east, and air will coagulate in west, and earth will coagulate in south, and water will coagulate above it in the north. But space doesn't coagulate anywhere because it's uniform. So the answer to that conundrum is space is certainly in the zodiac, but the zodiac is space. So all of the signs equally have the fifth element, space, but they don't equally have earth, water, fire, air, and hence they're identified as being earth dominated, fire dominated, water dominated, etc. Good, Simone. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Now, space will now give rise to the third. Space gives rise to air, the second element, and then air is going to give rise to the third element, which is fire. How? You start off with space, which just creates the possibility for distance between two things, which means wave. A wave has a place to exist. Waves start to go back and forth, vibrate. That's air. Movement in the sky is air. And then when there's movement, you get heat. So the third element that comes out is heat, which is classically described as fire. So the movement of air generates friction, which eventually evolves into something very powerful, fire. Fire is power, energy released. Fire generates light, which reveals form to our vision. So this is the primary way that the fire element is sensed. What it does in the tamas column, when it produces fire, then the light is going to enable us to see shape and color. So then the rajas column is going to produce a sense to interact with that. So some visual sense. And then the sattva column is going to produce the capacity to digest the visual data that sense produced. Fire generates light, which reveals form to our vision. Light. Okay. Yes, space is like that. Now, light heats the air. So light has a secondary property, which is heat. Because it's a release of energy, so it's generating heat. So this is going to cause precipitation. So fire, the relationship between fire and water is very interesting. This is Gandanta concept in astrology, the relationship or the border between fire and air. It's more confusing or difficult. The crossing from space to air is very simple. It's easy to understand. Oh, space has waves. The waves move. That's air. The movement causes heat. That's fire. So between air and fire is easy to understand, but fire and water is really weird and paradoxical. The way that fire generates water and water can hold fire. What we say, it puts out fire. It's like water can consume fire, and fire can consume water, but that means that they hold each other. So they can also release each other. So what fire does is by creating heat in the air, it starts the precipitation process. So the next thing to occur is precipitation, which is water will evolve. Light heats the air under the supreme glance, and after a long time, this precipitates moisture, water. So the couple of new phrases are here which aren't there, describing how space evolves into air and air evolves into fire. Now you have these two other phrases, under the supreme glance and after a long time. So that's because it's easy to evolve from space to air and from air to fire. But it takes a little while and a little oversight to get fire to produce water. But eventually fire precipitates water. Water is going to be sensed by flavor. So you taste water. So the Rajas column is now going to produce things that can experience flavor. And then the Sattva column is going to produce the capacity to comprehend those perceptions. Equally challenging, Bardo, but that's an interesting concept. Ms. Vinay wants to know if creation of the elements has anything to do with their masculine and feminine qualities. I didn't think of that, but the two masculine qualities come out first. And then the two more complex and heavier feminine elements come out last. So maybe that's something to think about. By the way, because earth and water are feminine and fire and air are masculine. Then light heats the water. Again, we get this phrase, under the supreme glance. So again, it takes more effort to generate the two feminine elements. It takes more effort to generate water and earth than it does to generate air and fire. So after a while, water is gonna produce earth. And it says the light heats the water. After a long time, that eventually releases sediments from it. So from fire, you get precipitation, and then from the water that results, you get sedimentation. And then sedimentation is the way that earth is generated or evolved out of water. Once you get earth, then you can get a sense to perceive it, and it's going to become the sense of fragrance or smell. Because why is earth the sense of fragrance? Because earth is actually solid. Smell is solid particles of things that are airborne. Very interesting. Now Ms. Vinay's got a question. But earth and air also have some qualities of their counterpart, right? Like earth is feminine but has the masculine quality of stability. No, it's just that there are extreme and mild forms of each gender. So fire is extreme masculine and water is extreme feminine. Air is mild masculine or middle, not very masculine, but masculine. And earth is not very feminine, but feminine. Because earth has, as you mentioned, the strength or rigidity to it. But that's the feminine quality of patience and endurance. And then air has the quality of lightness and just pleasure, joy to it, which are classically feminine qualities. But because it's not patient and enduring, and because it's fickle, then it's masculine. And quick and bold and adventurous. Okay, so here's a question. Why does taste have more affinity to water than touch? The feeling of water on skin is very distinct and you would not confuse it with anything. So good. This is basically what Vidura is going to ask next. Stuff about this. So Vidura has a question that's like what I thought Ms. Vinay's was and what Bardo's is. Vidura says, but wait, you ascribed a particular sense to a particular element. So space is hearing, and air is feeling, touching, and fire is seeing, water is tasting, and earth is smelling. But I can taste solid things. Every time I eat a banana, I can taste the banana solid. I can see water. I could see the earth. I can feel water. I can feel fire. So what's up with that? So Vidura's inquiry is, can't we also hear the air? We can hear the air. you said that the space is the thing that's the hearing element, but I hear the air and I can feel the fire. You said that air is the feeling thing, but I can feel the fire, etc., etc. So Maitreya says, yes, the elements successively evolved, developing increasing qualities. So every element contains all the qualities of the element that precedes it in the evolutionary chain. So that's a very simple answer. Air is an evolution of space. Fire is an evolution of air, which is an evolution of space. Water is an evolution of fire, which is an evolution of air, which is an evolution of space. And earth is an evolution of water, which is an evolution of fire, which is an evolution of air, which is an evolution of space. So the qualities of space are going to be present in every one of the 5 elements. That means you can hear every one of the 5 elements. You can hear a solid thing, you can hear a liquid thing, you can hear heat, you can hear energies like lightning and fire. You can hear the air. Air, the quality of the air is touching. So you will be able to touch or feel any element below the air in the evolutionary chain. You'll be able to feel fire, you'll be able to feel water, you'll be able to feel earth, but you can't feel space. The way that you feel space is through your hearing, through the effect that it has on hearing only. You don't actually feel it with your skin. And then the quality of fire is light, so it's visible. It produces vision. You can't see air. You can see things in air. You can see the effect that air has on things, but you can't see the air directly, nor can you see space. But you can see water, you can see earth. And the quality of water is taste. So you can't taste fire, and you can't taste air, and you can't taste space. You can taste things that are carried by fire, things that are carried by air, things that are in space, but you can't taste that element directly. But you can taste solid things, the element that's below the water. And smell, you cannot smell space, air, fire, or water. It's only because in our universe, you never get a clinically rarefied version of any one of these elements. You're never going to get something that is only space, only air, only water, only fire. All the elements are mixed together. So water is always carrying some solid thing in it. Mineral water. You distill the water, you won't taste it. It'll have no taste to it. You get rid of everything from the water. But the water has its flavor because of the other stuff that's in the water. You might even think that you taste fire sometimes, but you're tasting the smoke, and the smoke is carrying something else besides fire. Now Bara has a question about synesthesia. Synesthesia is where the powers in the sattva column don't work normally. They work abnormally. So the processing that's meant for the taste sense might be applied to the vision sense. And that can be a plus or a minus. Abhishek says, but hearing needs the air because sound waves need a medium. Sound waves need a medium. So sound, any one of the elements can be the medium for that. The space itself has sound in it, but the human ear isn't designed. The living things don't exist in space. Living things exist within the atmosphere. And so the organs that developed, because space lacks any pressure or anything, so none of the sensations are going to be possible if you existed in space. Because the living entities develop on Earth, the sense organs that develop for perceiving space, the ears, actually perceive it through its effect on the mediums of it. But it doesn't mean that waves don't travel in space. Otherwise, how do you get a spaceship to go to Mars and communicate and send waves back to the Earth? Then Catherine has an interesting thing. Catherine has an interesting thing. You can hear in your mind. So this is because you actually can't hear in your mind. Or there's two ways to consider this. You can only hear in your mind. The part where you experience any experience that you have of thing is going to be in the sattva column. The way that we experience any hearing, tasting, feeling, seeing, etc., isn't actually in the object being heard or felt or tasted. It isn't in the senses doing it. It's in the mind, which is like the computer screen that's interpreting the raw data from the objects through the senses. So in that sense, you only hear, taste, feel, see in the mind. And then also, when you go to sleep, for example, you can experience the taste of an apple or whatever in a dream, because you already have that data stored in your mind, and you can just re-experience it. So that just proves, Catherine, that the processing part of the data is the thing that you actually experience, and it's in the sattva. And so therefore, even when you're disconnected from rajas and tamas, as when you're in the dream state, then you can still experience sensual things. Hopefully that makes sense. Triv wants to know if I would consider relocating to outer space. No, I wouldn't, because it wouldn't last very long. No, Anil, synesthesia is synthesis of aesthetics. So it means, if aesthetic means experience of something. So if you make a sound, and by hearing that sound I experience a taste, not a sound, I experience a taste, or a sound and a taste, or a color or something. That's an example of synesthesia. It can be a very positive thing, or it can be a very confusing and negative thing, depending on how you have control of it, over it. But it's the reason why it's possible is because, just think of the whole thing as a computer, because it basically is. So you have these functions in your mind that process the data that's being input on these different buses: the visual bus, the audio bus, the taste bus, the scent bus, and the sight bus are feeding data into the respective programs. But there's no reason why you can't cross a wire to a different program, so that you could process one sense's data through a different processing function. So it's possible to get multi-sensual experience. All right. So that took longer than I thought. That took a lot longer than I thought. So what happens next is very interesting. The next section is evolution temporarily halts. So you see there was some slowdown. It was quick and easy in the beginning. Space. It's just empty. Who cares? It's so easy to evolve it. But then to generate air takes a little bit of time out of space, and then it takes more time to get fire, and then it really starts to get difficult to get fire to evolve into water, and then it's very difficult to get water to evolve to earth. Then once you've got all 5 of these things in 3 columns, it's going to be a really difficult gap to evolve to the next stage. So I'll just read a little bit from this. All the fundamental elements had evolved. So that's on the tamas column, all the fundamental elements, as had the prototypical sensorial structures in the rajas column, and the divine powers in the sattva column to command them. Yet these divine powers could not get the atomic elements to combine into the more sophisticated structures required to actualize the sensorial prototypes. So you get it? You have the atomic, let's call it the atomic building blocks of the universe. And then the most sophisticated ones of those atomic building blocks are all these powers, 5 powers. But the powers want to get the elements now to stop being atomically separated, to start to combine and produce interesting things. I guess I could imagine it would be something like this. Like, did you ever hear a raw sine wave? It's just the most annoying sound in the world. It's just like a pure, simple sound wave is the most annoying thing. Or just a pure light wave, or just, it's disgusting almost. It's irritating. It grates on your nerves. What the senses want to perceive is nuance, variety, sophistication, complication in the experience. So to generate a universe the way a consciousness would want to experience it is not just to have raw sound, raw flavor, etc. You want to get sophisticated variations on all these things. So the conscious entities with the ahankar, they want to make these 5 building blocks form into hundreds and millions and thousands and billions of varieties of things to be heard, seen, smelled, tasted, and touched, right? But they can't. So to get from that, to get evolutionary past where you just get the elements to where the elements start to combine, basically to get it from atomic to molecular, it was very, very, very difficult. And the way that Maitreya is going to explain it is, it's going to personify these divine powers because they are personified as these gods. Surya is the power for sight, and I forget some of the other ones. I forget the other ones. We actually went over it earlier. So those personified powers are then they're trying to act on the elements and get them to combine into structures, but they're unsuccessful. And therefore they appeal to Purusha for help. Nice. That's nice, Emil. So what you're actually going to hear next is these personified divine powers themselves are going to pray. So that's why I titled today's session, because I thought this other part would go faster, but the prayers of the universe itself is going to pray to the Purusha to help. It's going to ask for help. So let's see what it says. We are nothing before your divine lotus-like feet, they said. Those who endeavor to surrender to them find your feet to be an umbrella that shields from the heat of suffering. Even the greatest miseries in this difficult existence cannot enter beneath that umbrella. Living beings in this difficult existence will not find happiness within themselves. What? Living beings in this difficult existence will not find happiness within themselves. Instead, burning miseries will plague them. So what does it mean? That there's no happiness within the self? No, it means they will not find the happiness within themselves. Instead, they will get plagued by difficult miseries. Knowing this, we seek the shade of your lotus-like feet by following the Vedic mantra that originates from you, like following a bird to a tree, or following a sacred river to the ocean. So this is a really nice analogy. He's saying, these divine powers are saying, you produce this Vedic mantra. You produce the mantra of the Veda. And if you follow the meaning of that Vedic mantra, you'll be led to Purusha, to Bhagavan. Just like if you follow a river, you'll get to the ocean, to the sea. Or if you follow a bird, you'll get to a tree. So, because living beings are going to be plagued by difficulties, you produce the Vedic mantra to lead them out of that difficulty into the happiness that's within themselves. The heart, they continue, becomes very pure by devotionally and attentively hearing the Vedic mantra about your lotus-like feet. Then, by meditating on those feet with a pure heart, true understanding arises and creates powerful detachment and sobriety. So we seek the sanctuary of your lotus-like feet. Why feet? Again, is it a foot fetish? It's just that feet are the beginning of the person, the bottom of the person. So it's just like something that we're not used to in these days, but it's just a simple way of referring respectfully to a person. So there's also another interesting point here, is that you're not going to be just despite like the YouTube videos, which are like, listen to this vibration, and then your chakras will align to this vibration, and then you will ascend to the higher level of dimensionality and consciousness. Um, it's not just, you just don't listen to a vibration and then your chakras align to it. It's not the way Vedic mantras work. You hear the Vedic mantra and you contemplate the meaning, because that meaning has to lead you to a comprehension of its source. That's why they're saying, if you devotionally and attentively hear the Vedic mantra and then meditate on it, means contemplate it, then true understanding will arise, and that will detach people and make them sober about the causes of misery. And then they can move towards the cause of happiness. Those feet will descend into this world to create, maintain, and destroy it. So we seek their shelter. Just by remembering them, your devotees become fearless. Even though your feet stand within everyone, comprehension of this fact remains far away from people. Even though Bhagavan is the essence of everyone and everything, comprehension of that fact evades us. That's why we need to contemplate the Vedic mantra, which will point us in a direction that we can perceive that. Even though your feet stand within, remember, the feet are the umbrella that can shield from the heat of suffering. Even though your feet stand within everyone, comprehension of this fact remains far away from people who are terribly excited by addictions to their body and its possessions. People are terribly excited, thoroughly, completely, day in and day out, terribly excited about the addictions to their bodies and its possessions, thinking, this is me, this is mine. Whether positive or negative, we're either depressed about our body, frustrated about our body, or excited about it, what it can do and how we're going to use it. Because we think this is me and that stuff is mine. So we're intoxicated by that. But the Vedic mantra, if you contemplate it and understand it, will get you sober and detached from that stuff. Because that stuff is actually the cause of suffering. Those eyes that stare far off at hordes of impermanent things cannot see the Supreme Master with their inner vision. So the feet of Bhagavan are within everybody. But everybody is blind to that because their eyes are staring far away from them at hordes of impermanent, transient, evolving, changing things. So the eyes which stare far off at hordes of impermanent things cannot see the Supreme Master with their inner vision. They're obsessed and fascinated by their external vision. They can never see the beautiful wealth of your playful, blissful pastimes. But those who drink the nectarian descriptions of your pastimes become fabulously wealthy. With what kind of wealth? All-encompassing divine love. They completely comprehend everything about the very essence of renunciation and quickly attain your fearless abode. No matter how many years you'll be striving in spiritual practices or studying Bhagavatam or anything, every single time you come back to this monologue or prayer by the divine powers, you will understand it more and more and more deeply. Those who avoid your service might also realize their true self and attain fearlessness, but only after the extremely difficult feat of conquering tenacious materialism on the strength of their self-discipline. So it is possible to detach from externality that we're so obsessed with without the power of devotion and love to Bhagavan. It is possible, but so difficult, because you have to rely entirely only on your own strength of self-discipline, which is very, very small in comparison to the gigantic power of the world. But those who are blessed to have the emotional power of love for Bhagavan, it naturally and easily pulls their interest towards Bhagavan and away from external fascinations. Please know that we are yours. Because of you, we have come into being. So please know that we are yours. So what are these divine powers? Those are the powers of Purusha. Those are the powers of Vishnu. This primal life form, this original life form, Vishnu, has the powers of perception, the 5 powers of perception. That's why we all have them in some form or another, even turtles and bugs. Every life form which manifests from Vishnu is going to have Vishnu's qualities. So these raw, primal, sensorial powers are saying, we're your powers. Please know that we are yours. Because of you, we have come into being through the 3 qualities of Maya. So we are just your powers coming into Maya and acting in Maya now for the sake of creating the world. But we are unable, so now they come to the point. We are unable to perform our functions. We can't get this done because we cannot get the atomic elements to combine into complex forms. We want to succeed in our endeavors because then we can enable living beings to offer you food and partake of it also. So the reason why we want to succeed with our endeavors is because this whole external situation that we're going to evolve here is actually going to be able to be helpful to living beings because they can utilize it to understand and interact with and experience you. Because of that potential in the external world, because it has connection to Bhagavan, because of the potential for the external world to reveal a relationship with Bhagavan, the powers are interested in getting their work done and making sure it comes into being. You are the self-sustained original ancient person, the source of all varieties of divinities. You are unborn but give birth to everyone. For you impregnated the womb of Maya's qualities by awakening the consciousness of living beings. That's a good summary. It's a good thing we clarified it yesterday. You are unborn but give birth to everyone, for you impregnated the womb of Maya's qualities, the gunas, by awakening the consciousness of living beings, by awakening the avyakta. Out of kindness to your children, please tell us. So they're identifying as like his children. Out of kindness to your children, please tell us what we should do to succeed in our tasks. Please empower us with the potency to fulfill your vision for the world. And that's the end of the chapter. Chapter 6, Vishnu's the next chapter, and then Vishnu or the Purusha is going to help him out. And then the evolution is going to get over that snag and get to the complex forms. All right, so let's see if there's any questions that can be addressed or whatever. So when we pray, should see it as a way of seeing things more accurately. It's not like a miracle will happen if we don't understand or it can happen. I'm not sure what Anil is saying. Bardo, so mantra is like national anthem. You should mean what you sing. Yeah. Catherine is asking Anil what he means. Abhishek, to be seen as the dharma of Prakriti, to see as the dharma of Purusha, then why the jivas are supposed to look away from Maya and look to the seer. You got to be careful. The seers are part of the scene. This is the complex thing. The complex thing is that the object which is seen is also a seer. That there's nothing more desirable to see than a seer. And so that's why the seers are a part of this whole Prakriti thing too. So there's Purusha and Prakriti, and there's a Tatastha thing. You ever heard the word Tatastha? Tatastha means it has qualities of both. It's a margin. It's on the margin or a border between the two. The Purusha is the seer, Prakriti is the seen, and then there's the Tatastha or Para Prakriti or Purusha Prakriti, which is living beings like you and me. And okay, so it can function. We function both as the seer and the seen. What are jivas? Jiva means life, and it's a word that refers to all the living consciousness. Basically, jiva means soul or something like that, conscious being. All right, great. don't want to stop, but we'll stop and see you tomorrow. Thanks everybody for joining.